You ever see a person call the cops on a woman for fishing? No. Then you've never lived in a neighborhood run by Marlene Whitaker, president of the Willow Creek HOA and self-declared guardian of every mailbox, fence height, and blade of grass from Lot 1 to 85. My name's Silas Harlan. I'm a mechanic. My wife, Kendra, is a U.S. Army captain on leave after a 10-month deployment. We moved into Willow Creek for the peace and quiet. Big mistake. Kendra's idea of decompressing is casting a line into the little neighborhood pond behind our house. Apparently, that's a war crime, according to Marlene. Last Saturday, I was under the hood of my '68 Mustang, sweat dripping off my nose when our daughter Lily ran into the garage, eyes wide. Daddy. That mean lady's yelling at Mommy again. I wiped my hands on a rag and bolted toward the backyard. Sure enough, there stood Marlene in her usual uniform, oversized sunglasses, pastel visor, and a clipboard like it was welded to her hand. "This isn't a public park," she barked at Kendra. "You're violating HOA rules. That pond is off limits." Kendra didn't even flinch. She reeled in calmly, adjusted her cap, and said, "There's no sign saying fishing is prohibited." Marlene jabbed her pen toward a bush. There was a sign. It got stolen. "Probably by people like you." Kendra raised an eyebrow. "People like me?" Marlene caught herself. "Too late." "You know what?" she spat. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." I stepped between them. "That's our backyard, Marlene, and that pond's on communal land." "It's in the charter." She glared at me like I'd just lit her azaleas on fire. "I am the charter, Mr. Harlan." Then she stomped to the curb, whipped out her phone, and dialed. "She's really calling the cops," Kendra muttered. I nodded. "Let her." 15 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up. Marlene practically jogged to greet them, waving her arms like she was directing traffic at a crime scene. "There she is," she said, pointing at Kendra. "That woman is fishing illegally and refuses to leave private HOA property." The officers walked past her without saying a word and approached Kendra, who stood tall, calm, and still holding her fishing rod. Then something beautiful happened. Both officers stopped, took one look at her uniform, and immediately straightened up. "Ma'am," the taller one said, "thank you for your service." Marlene's face twisted. "Wait, what? You're just going to let her?" The other officer turned. "Ma'am, you called us for someone fishing in a pond." "That's not a police matter. She's breaking HOA rules," he sighed. "Even if that's true, that's for civil court, not an emergency line. You can't misuse 911 for this." Marlene's mouth opened and closed like a broken vent. She looked at the clipboard, looked at Kendra, looked at the uniform, and froze. "You okay?" I asked her. She didn't answer. The taller officer turned to me. "Sir, does your wife have permission to be on this land? Our backyard backs up to it. It's communal. And yeah, every homeowner has access." "It's in the bylaws," he nodded. "Then you're good." Kendra gave them both a respectful nod. "Appreciate it, officers." They tipped their caps and left. Marlene didn't say a word, just stood there, stunned, lips twitching like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the right frequency. We went back to our Saturday. Kendra caught 3 bluegill and a bass before dinner, but that wasn't the end of it. Marlene never stops at losing. The next morning, there was a letter taped to our front door with the Willow Creek HOA logo at the top and a $500 fine scribbled in red ink across the bottom. I stood on the porch, holding the fine notice in one hand and my coffee in the other, rereading the absurdity like it might change if I blinked hard enough. Kendra leaned on the doorframe behind me, arms folded, still in her PT gear from her morning run. $500, I muttered. Handwritten, not even a proper letterhead. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You noticed the date on it?" I looked again. "Yesterday." "Exactly. She wrote this before the cops even showed up," Kendra said. "She already decided I was guilty." I turned the paper over, blank. Not a single clause cited. No bylaw reference. Just her signature, that same loopy mess she scrawls on every notice of violation she drops like confetti across the neighborhood. I went inside, pulled the HOA charter from the drawer, and laid it on the kitchen table. Kendra grabbed a highlighter and started flipping through it with surgical precision. "Page 32, she said. "Pond access is granted to all residents for recreational purposes. Fishing is listed. No permits mentioned." "So where's this 500 even coming from?" I asked. She tapped the paper. Thin air. 20 minutes later, I was standing at the HOA office. It's a converted sunroom on the side of Marlene's house, complete with a Willow Creek executive board sign above the window, like she's running a Fortune 500 company from a folding card table. I knocked. A voice snapped, closed. I knocked again, louder. She threw open the door. Read the sign. Oh, it's you. I held up the letter. You want to tell me what this is? You know what it is, she said without meeting my eyes. Violation of use policy. Unauthorized activity on HOA-managed property. Funny, I said, because I just went over the charter. Fishing is authorized, and residents have full access to the pond. You can't fine us for something that's permitted. Her eyes darted to the side. The board voted to revise that section. When? Last month. Where's the meeting record? Not public. That's illegal, I said flatly. All HOA decisions must be documented and available for resident review within 30 days. That's state law, she blinked. You're not a lawyer. Nope, I said, but I did grow up with one, my father. He's retired now, but he still remembers how to read a statute. Her fingers twitched around the edge of the door. If you don't like the rules, perhaps Willow Creek isn't the right fit for your family. I stepped forward, just enough to make her lean back. If you think we're backing down because you don't like who uses the pond, you're in for a long year, Marlene. She slammed the door. By the time I got home, Kendra had already started folding copies of the letter and our highlighted charter pages into a stack of envelopes. Neighborhood mailer, she said. Let's see how many people know they're being fined for things that aren't violations. We split the list and hit mailboxes before noon. By dinner, our phones started buzzing. First, it was the Ramirez family from down the street, then the Nguyens, then a retired teacher named Mrs. Lee who'd lived here since the early 90s. All of them had stories. Fines for parking in their own driveways, threats over unapproved patio furniture, even a cease and desist letter for putting up a Happy Diwali banner last fall. Everyone thought they were alone. We set up a meeting for the following Saturday. I booked the local library's community room. Kendra printed out a new set of packets, each with a copy of the HOA charter, a list of recent complaints. And this part was her idea, a blank affidavit page residents could sign to confirm what they'd experienced. By the time the meeting started, we had over 30 people packed into that room. Folding chairs scraped the tile as people filed in, murmuring to each other in low voices, some clearly nervous. Marlene had always operated in the shadows, targeting one household at a time. But now the lights were on. Kendra stood at the front and introduced herself. No uniform, no rank. Just a neighbor, sleeves rolled up. We're not trying to burn anything down, she said. We just want accountability. If we're being fined, we deserve to know why, and if someone's abusing authority, we deserve better. People started sharing, one by one, a single mom fined for a trampoline. A veteran threatened with lien papers over a garden shed. A family who'd been reported to Child Protective Services for having chalk drawings on their sidewalk. When the testimonies ended, I asked how many had ever seen official minutes from an HOA board meeting. 3 hands went up. I asked how many had received fines with no bylaw citation. Almost every hand in the room. That's when we brought out the binders. Copies of the HOA's filings with the county, a list of board members, and their terms except something didn't add up. Marlene's last term was supposed to end 2 years ago, but there'd been no election, no notice, no ballots. Kendra looked around the room. Anyone ever vote in an HOA election? Silence. That's when I knew she wasn't just overreaching. She was squatting in power she no longer had, illegally. We filed a formal complaint with the county registrar the next morning. We submitted the affidavits, the documentation of fines with no legal support, and a request for a review of board activities on the grounds of operating without proper authority. 3 days later, we got a call from a county investigator. Mr. Harlan, he said, we've had other complaints over the years, but nothing this organized. That meeting record you sent, that's gold. What happens now? I asked. We've launched a formal audit of the HOA's activities. If we find they've been collecting fines without lawful basis, that's fraud. And if she's been acting under expired authority, she may be facing criminal charges. I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding. Kendra was already on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Think she knows what's coming? She asked. Not yet, I said. But she will. The next morning, uniformed county officials and a plainclothes auditor showed up at Marlene's house with a clipboard and a badge. She tried to block the door, but they flashed paperwork. I watched from across the street as they stepped inside. Neighbors started trickling out of their homes, pretending to check mail or walk dogs. No one said a word, but every eye was locked on that house. An hour later, the officials emerged with boxes. Labeled file folders, a desktop computer, and several binders. Marlene followed them out, jaw clenched so tight her temple pulsed. She spotted me across the street. You did this, she said. No, I said. You did. We just stopped pretending not to notice. She stormed back inside. That evening, Kendra and I sat on the porch with iced tea while Lily played with sidewalk chalk. A slow line of neighbors passed by, each one offering a nod, a wave, or a quiet thank you. It wasn't over. We knew that, but the spell was broken. For the first time, Marlene Whitaker was no longer untouchable. And Willow Creek. It was starting to feel like home. The following week started with rain-long, steady sheets that turned the pond into a silver mirror and washed the chalk off our driveway. But the clouds did little to cool the heat Marlene had brought on herself. Word had spread fast after the county audit team showed up at her door. People who hadn't spoken to their neighbors in years were suddenly talking again. Doors that had stayed shut were now wide open. By Wednesday, the Willow Creek Facebook group, usually just lost pet photos and mulch recommendations, had turned into a war room. Someone uploaded scanned copies of fines they'd received. Others posted photos of their security cameras catching Marlene or her bored cronies slipping notices into mailboxes at midnight. One resident had footage of her reaching over a locked gate to take measurements of a backyard deck, clipboard in hand, face lit by the flash of her phone. Then something new landed in our mailbox, a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside, a single USB drive. Kendra plugged it into her laptop without a word. The folder inside was titled HOA Meeting Private. We opened one of the video files. It was a phone recording, shaky but clear. The date in the corner was from 4 months ago. Marlene sat at the head of a long table in what looked like her dining room. 4 other board members flanked her. None of them looked comfortable. We can't just raise the monthly dues without authorization, a man said. Jason. I recognized him from the block over. We don't need authorization if we call it a temporary maintenance surcharge, Marlene replied. Loop it through the landscaping budget. Nobody reads the fine print. A woman across from her shifted in her seat. That's not how it works. We need a vote. Marlene's voice dropped. Then we forge it, or we say the ballots were lost, whatever it takes. I'm not watching this neighborhood fall apart because people don't want to pay for discipline. Kendra paused the video. That's fraud, she said. I nodded. And conspiracy if everyone in that room didn't report it. We called the county investigator we'd spoken with before. This time, he didn't just take notes. He forwarded our call to the district attorney's office. A fraud prosecutor met with us the next morning at the courthouse. We handed over the USB and every signed affidavit from the residents. She didn't promise much. Just said, this is more than enough to open a criminal investigation. By Friday, 2 unmarked black sedans pulled up to the neighborhood. This time, the county wasn't alone. A pair of federal agents stepped out, one carrying a briefcase, the other a warrant folder thick enough to choke a shredder. They didn't knock. They walked straight into Marlene's house with a court order and started seizing everything. Laptops, file cabinets, the whole damn desktop tower. That night, something strange happened. Her porch light stayed off. The next morning, I found out why. A neighbor, a nurse named Dana, who lived 2 houses down, knocked on our door. She wasn't holding a pie or a complaint, just a photo. She's gone, Dana said. Packed her SUV at 5 this morning, didn't even say goodbye, just drove off. I looked at the picture. Marlene's back was to the camera, hair in a tight bun, suitcase in each hand. Her house keys dangled from the mailbox slot. Kendra stood behind me, so she ran. Looks that way, Dana said, but I don't think it'll help her. It didn't. The DA's office issued a warrant for her arrest 2 days later. Turns out, she'd been misappropriating funds for years, redirecting HOA dues into a private account under the name of a shell landscaping company that didn't exist. Over $80,000 had vanished. The rest of the board, after seeing the video, came forward. 3 resigned immediately. 1 offered to testify, claiming Marlene had threatened to ruin their credit and reputation if they didn't go along with her schemes. The county accepted the offer. With the board dissolved, the HOA charter triggered a re-election clause. A temporary oversight committee was appointed by the county. Kendra was one of the names they suggested. She declined. "This isn't what I came back for," she told me. But she did agree to help rewrite the bylaws, alongside a small group of residents. They met every Sunday afternoon in the library's conference room. The new rules were transparent, voted on, and publicly posted, something that hadn't happened in over a decade. The community began to shift. Fines were frozen, all previous violations were reviewed, many were dismissed entirely. The new interim treasurer, Mrs. Lee, the retired teacher, discovered that several families had been overcharged for years. Refunds were issued, quietly, gratefully. One afternoon, while I was welding a new exhaust pipe in the garage, a teenager walked up and handed me an envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn thank you card, crayon hearts, and a stick figure fishing by a pond. "My mom said you and your wife saved the neighborhood," she told me. I didn't know what to say, but the biggest change happened 3 weeks later. A notice arrived from the county clerk's office. It was a formal apology. Not for what Marlene had done. She was facing charges and would have her reckoning in court, but for the fact that it had taken so long for anyone to listen. They offered to hold a public forum to hear concerns from any HOA-governed community in the area. The meeting was packed. Some people drove in from towns away. The clerk took extensive notes and promised legislative review. Kendra came with me. She didn't speak until the end. "When ordinary people get bullied into silence, the system breaks," she said. "But if one person stands up, just one, it starts to crack. And when everyone else realizes they're not alone, that's when it collapses." The room stood up when she finished. As for Marlene, she didn't stay gone for long. She was arrested crossing into Nevada 2 weeks after fleeing, claimed she was on vacation. The judge didn't buy it. She was charged with embezzlement, forgery, and obstruction. Her court hearings made the local newspaper. The headline read, "HOA president indicted for fraud. Residents reclaim control. The pond behind our house is still quiet. Lily fishes by the edge sometimes, joined by neighborhood kids. No one bothers them. No one shouts. No one calls the cops." The no fishing sign that Marlene claimed was stolen mysteriously reappeared. It had been buried under a tarp in her garage, still in its packaging, never installed. We donated it to the community center. They hung it on the wall under a plaque that reads, "Let the people cast their lines." And every time I hear laughter from the water's edge or see someone walking a dog without looking over their shoulder, I remember the day she called the cops on my wife. She thought she was making a statement. Instead, she started a movement. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale air freshener. I sat on the second bench, hands clasped, watching as Marlene Whitaker stood before the bench in a stiff navy suit that looked 2 sizes too large, like she was shrinking inside it. Her hair was neatly pinned, but her expression flickered between blank and boiling, like she still couldn't decide whether to play the victim or the martyr. Judge Halberd, a silver-haired man with a voice that could split firewood, adjusted his glasses and looked down at her with the kind of patience you reserve for toddlers and tax fraudsters. "So let me get this straight," he said. "You operated a homeowners association under an expired term of leadership, failed to hold elections for over 2 years, issued fines without legal authority, forged meeting minutes, and redirected resident dues into a private account you created under a fake business name." Marlene opened her mouth, but her attorney, a guy who looked like he hadn't planned on defending someone this far gone, touched her arm lightly. The judge raised a single brow. "And now you expect leniency because, why, you were just trying to maintain standards." Her attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges procedural missteps but insists there was never intent to deceive." The judge leaned forward. "She forged 12 board votes." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Several residents from Willow Creek were here. I spotted Jason, Dana, the Nuyans, and even old Mrs. Lee, who had brought a legal pad full of handwritten notes and sat like she was grading a test. Kendra sat beside me, hands resting calmly in her lap, gaze locked on the front like she was back in a strategy briefing. She hadn't said a word all morning. The judge continued. This court has reviewed financial records, video evidence, and sworn affidavits from over 30 residents. You created a hostile environment, retaliated against dissent, and misappropriated over $80,000 in homeowner funds. Marlene finally spoke. Her voice cracked slightly, but the words came out cold. I did what I had to do. If I hadn't taken control, this neighborhood would have turned to chaos. I kept it clean. Orderly. The judge sat back. That's not leadership, Miss Whitaker. That's tyranny wrapped in landscaping receipts. He turned toward the prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman with a stack of files that could have doubled as a step stool. Sentencing recommendation, restitution in full, she said without hesitation. 3 years probation, 18 months house arrest, and a permanent bar from serving on any HOA board. Anywhere. The judge nodded slowly. And criminal record, felony embezzlement, forgery, and obstruction. Marlene's lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead like if she didn't blink. Maybe this wasn't happening. The judge rapped his gavel once. So ordered. It was done, no handcuffs, but she wouldn't be going far. A court officer escorted her out a side door. She didn't look back. Outside, the sun broke through a thick ceiling of gray clouds. The courthouse steps were wide, and people gathered in small clusters, talking low, glancing at each other like they didn't know what came next. Jason walked up to me, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. So that's it, he asked. She's out, we rebuild. Kendra stepped forward. We already started. This just clears the rubble. He exhaled through his nose. Never thought I'd see the day. Most people don't, she said. Until it's already passed. Dana joined us, holding a folder. The county's mailing out restitution letters. They said we'll get it in increments, but they're starting with the overcharged dues. Kendra nodded. And the new board. First election in 5 weeks, Dana said. Ballots will go through the registrar this time. No more basement meetings. I looked toward the parking lot where Mrs. Lee was carefully turning her Buick out of a tight spot. Feels a little strange, doesn't it? I said. Like we just finished a fight we didn't sign up for. You didn't, Kendra said. But nobody else was going to. That night, the neighborhood felt different, not louder, not busier, just open. Lily was in the backyard again, her little tackle box beside her as she flung a line into the pond with the same concentration Kendra used during a live op. A few kids from down the street were skipping rocks nearby. No one was watching them with a clipboard. I was on the porch, polishing the chrome on the Mustang, when a man in a maintenance uniform approached with a clipboard. I tensed out of habit until I saw the city logo stitched onto his shirt. Mr. Harlan, he asked. We're here to install the new access sign for the pond, county directive, full public notice, just need you to confirm placement. I signed it. He walked back to his truck, pulled out a metal sign with etched lettering and sank the post into the ground just beside the footpath. Willow Creek Pond Resident Access Area, fishing permitted, respect all wildlife. The sun hit it just right. It gleamed. Kendra came out with 2 cold drinks. It's finally official. Yeah, I said, sipping. And permanent. The next week, the newly formed Oversight Committee released something that caught the attention of local news, a public audit of every HOA transaction from the past 10 years. It wasn't just Marlene. Turns out, at least 2 former board members had benefited from vendor payments to companies that didn't exist past a P.O. box in another county. The DA launched a second wave of investigations. Charges were filed quietly, no spectacle, just paperwork and slow justice. But for Willow Creek, the tide had turned. The first community forum under the new board was held outside, under a rented canopy near the pond. No secret ballots, no hushed whispers, just neighbors asking questions and getting real answers. One man asked if they could finally install solar panels without a war. Another asked about converting the old tennis court into a dog run. A teenager stood up and suggested a neighborhood garden. Kendra raised her hand last. Let's put a clause in the bylaws, she said. One that limits board terms and requires a third-party election monitor. The crowd nodded. It passed on the spot. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water, I realized something. This wasn't just about fishing. It never was. It was about who gets to decide what peace looks like and how far people will go to protect it. Marlene had built her power on fear and silence, and when that cracked, there was nothing underneath. No plan, no integrity, just control for control's sake. But now the neighborhood had something she never expected. Memory. People remembered who stood up, who stepped forward, who turned on their porch lights when others flicked theirs off. And that's what keeps a place alive, not rules or fines or perfect lawns, but neighbors who remember. As for us, we kept our promise. We stayed. No more late-night citations. No more anonymous letters. No more shadows. Just the sound of a fishing line whipping through the air and a quiet pond reflecting a community that finally saw itself for what it could be.